Dr. Chuck the Science Schmuck.
Synchronize. I tried to come up with a comical intro to this video, but it's like Sunday morning in either winter or summer. There's something making sound outside, so it's one of the two. So, that is a concrete rabbit. Now, you may be questioning, why concrete rabbit? And I don't have a good answer to why concrete rabbit. Lawn ornaments are not something I really understand, but I found these. I say these. Why do I say these? Well, because of this unfortunate situation. This rabbit, I'm afraid, has severe hearing loss, in that his ears have been severed. Which, in actuality, if you cut off your ears, would not make you deaf. It would just make it a little harder to hear, and you kind of look weird unless you had long hair and then people couldn't tell. Not too common to meet people without ears. Not too common to find a rabbit without ears. They're actually physiologically, important for body ventilation. Notice that's why things like rats and mice have long tails, rabbits have big ears, so I think that's actually critical for the function. These rabbits, though, are very thoroughly dead. They're not dead, they're concrete. They were never alive to begin with. These were kind of a fad, I guess, in like the 90s. And these are two little baby rabbits that, go with a bigger rabbit. But this one's broken, as I've said. So the point is, this poor, unfortunate little rabbit... What? I can't hear you. I have no ears. Oh no. Well, don't worry, little rabbit. I intend to try to fix you. Well, you're a schmuck. You're going to do a terrible job. And it's going to look terrible. Stop spoiling the end of the video. I'm not a great ventriloquist, but I did find out the other day that if you say Chuck E. Cheese, your mouth doesn't move in the slightest. Chuck E. Cheese. That's weird. It's also mostly because my lower jaw doesn't move when I speak, which is why I have this weird voice. That and the southern New York, Connecticut accent. Holes. Okay, so the basic problem with trying to repair a rabbit is that I need to rebuild the ears, which is why I took two. This one has no ears, but it's an identical mold to the other. I hope. This one has the ears intact. So all I need to do, in theory, is take a mold of the ears and then cast a new hat, basically. Now, for that, I'm using my good old standby of sifted concrete, which is a combination of sand, small rocks, and cement, which I previously used to make a large tick. Statue of a tick, not a real tick. A large tick would be terrifying. But also very interesting. I'd ride them. I'd build a chariot of ticks. So what am I going to do to fix this rabbit? Well, first of all, he's really dirty. And I would wash them off, but it's actually like 20 years in federal prison for cleaning these, because, bunny laundering. First, I'm going to need this ball of clay. Clay. Why did I just slam that? It's not an emphatic expression of my emotions, because as an android I don't feel emotions. It's because I needed the bottom flat so that the rabbit will sit level. So, I need to produce a copy. In other words, I need to take this rabbit, and he shall become the mold. Or she. I don't know what a rabbit is. I think they're all just genderless semi-rodents. They're not rodents. They're not Lepidoptera. No, lagomorphs. Rabbits are lagomorphs. But an interesting piece of trivia about rabbits, I live in New York. These are white. White rabbits don't exist in nature, like in New York. Bit of rabbit information while I'm making this mold. There's actually multiple types of animal that we would consider to be a rabbit. The one that you commonly think of is actually, the European rabbit, especially if you're European. You see those things, running around. It's what, you buy a pet rabbit or a food rabbit. Yes, people eat them. It's weird. You can't eat just them, though, because you'll die. They're poisonous if you eat too many. White rabbits are of the European type. In America, we have what are basically jackrabbits, which are an entirely different species. There's also hares, but I'm not even going to get into hares, because I don't even know what a hare is. It's actually interesting because there is a virus that pretty much wiped out the entirety of rabbits in Europe, because somebody found it in American rabbits, which it's not very harmful, and said, you know what? I'm going to clear all the pest rabbits off of my property. And he did, as well as all of continental Europe. So, Don't introduce viruses in a place they're not designed for. And no, it doesn't actually work in Australia. They tried. So, the rabbit is now stuck. I need to attempt withdraw the rabbit. It's hopefully adequate that I can then insert a second rabbit into the same hole, mash him down, and bind the ears. Now, you may be thinking, well, that's kind of dumb. You're trying to bond 70-year-old concrete to concrete, and of course that's not going to work. Concrete to concrete bonds don't work well. The idea is not to physically bond the concrete. It is to produce this pattern itself molded into the concrete in the ear assembly. Ah, clay in the eye! I know that feeling, rabbit. No, I don't. I don't have feeling. The idea is to produce this pattern in the ears so that then I can take the ear assembly and superglue with cyanoacrylate. I mean, there's evidence that the ears, wherever they are, were glued, but this is more like a hot glue, silicone, rubbery glue, which is not ideal. Cyanoacrylate the ears directly to the head assembly and then paint over it so that it looks perfect. I don't know if that'll work. It might not. So we're gonna give it a try. Why goggles? So that that doesn't happen to me. I'm not gonna need too much. Hopefully. Sifted concrete. This is not ginger ale. I hope. It's not ginger ale. Mostly. It's just water. It's not just water. It doesn't taste like just water. Oh, it's gritty. Okay, so the concrete in question needs to be relatively liquid. Fluid, maybe, is the right word? Juicy. I like the word juicy. Not on people's... I'm going to want to make sure that this is well seated in the clay. Otherwise you'll get voids, which will look weird. The ears will not form properly. If this doesn't work, I can always try again. Unless, it bonds disturbing, defective, horrifying ears to this rabbit. Well, now he's looking at me like, wait, what? I mean, you can't do surgery without the possibility of, creating new life in a bizarre abomination that wants to, procreate and cover the planet. A cauldron of rabbit ear stew. A little too much. Well, there's no getting it out now. We gotta go forward with what we got. Now, I take our test subject, and I shall insert his head into the cauldron, and when he emerges, he shall be reborn with hearing. And, hopefully not defective, concrete work. Oh, there actually is too much. He's not, fitting. Oh, his head's all gross. Well, okay, his ears are now being bonded to his body, so hopefully this works. Will it, though? Well, that's a question for me, and I should know it, but I don't, but you're about to. And there we go. It's been a week. The rabbit has now hardened to a great degree. You can see the debris material has hardened. This one doesn't taste as good as when you add sugar to it, but it also hardens a lot better. Now, despite the moisture, the rabbit has developed a hard hat, and that's a fruit fly. There's a lot of fruit flies down here. So it's a question of whether or not I can actually open this. And the answer is, no. That's the problem we didn't foresee. I expected the clay would stay soft and pliable throughout the duration of its existence. Thing is, clay doesn't do that. But, that's the thing. Concrete is not very water soluble. It is water soluble if your water's very acid, but the water here is hopefully not that acid that it dissolves concrete. Clay, however, becomes pliable when exposed to water. So I'm going to get up and go to the science sink and get it wet. The clay is moist. Also, I got a knife. So the key there is the clay may not be soft to the touch, but it will cut. Yeah, I can kind of feel some hard spots. So The interesting thing about going straight down is you can kind of get a cross section. I see. Yep, that's clay. The question is, where does the clay end and the rabbit begin? It's like cutting a cake, but with like an angry squirrel inside. If you hit him, he's gonna go after your nuts. Okay. As you can see, that's a hard spot. I've hit an ear. So I need to try to go around that. The clay is probably still good for something. You can probably still use it for something. It's like carving. Oh! You know, it's not terrible, but it is not the taste I was expecting. I was thinking, oh, clay, it's probably going to taste like dirt. Definitely not. That tasted like metal. Okay, you see here we're getting to an area where the clay insulated most of the rabbit's head, but there is like a fringe of concrete that runs around the edge, which we definitely don't want. However, since the rabbits are painted with this lead-based white paint, the concrete does not actually bond well. I mean, the concrete doesn't bond well to the concrete. Concrete doesn't bond to anything. That's why we don't glue things. We don't give a bunch of third graders concrete and say, glue things together, because they will not be able to. It's not good glue. But they will find a way to glue themselves waist deep in the ground in concrete. Try getting a third grader out of waist deep concrete. Ugh. Stabbed him right through the head. And that is exactly what we expected to happen. I just cranked off this guy's ears. But as I just said, it's not glue, it's concrete. It's structural, it's not adhesive. Of course, it's not actually going to bond to the rabbit. We didn't expect it to come off in one piece. So this isn't horrifying. Well, I mean, there is a degree of body horror to, like, a rabbit suddenly having his ears severed inside his clay hat. That's horrifying. But this isn't, you know, the end of the experiment. The ears are right here on my stick. I just need to not break the... I need to get them out without breaking them, basically. I didn't expect them to be attached to the rabbit, but as long as I can get them out, then we're still good. You can see there's concrete flat pieces that kind of have bonded to the ear assembly. Ooh. Ow. I don't think I've ever sneezed on camera before. That's how I actually sneeze. I have sneezed that way since forever. I've only ever met one person who sneezes that way, who was a librarian. Okay. I'm gonna soak this in water to make the clay more pliable, and I am going to remove the weird mask from this rabbit. So I will teleport this and be back on my way to the rabbit. This is a little harder in a literal sense because concrete is hard generally. Unless it's soft, then you have a problem. But as you can see, he is exactly as you would expect him to be. Same as he was when he went in the hat. And the hat is now here. Don't know what I'm going to do with that hat. And it appears that I have freed the ears from their clayey prison. So, there's a rabbit. There are the ears, which would sit, they're directional, so they have a forward and a back. There is a little bit of a slight problem in that the ears are not 100% sized properly, because the clay kind of overran. You saw the rim I was chipping off, the weird, freaky, what is it? The mask. The rabbit had a mask. I was cutting that off. That's because the ears are slightly too big. Can't really fix that, so I figure, well, it's probably better to fix that in post, I guess. I mean, some ears are better than no ears, right? So how exactly do I want to go about fixing the ears to the rabbit? Well, the first answer to that is they need to be changed to the color of a rabbit. Now, the color of a rabbit is derived from the color of whoever spray painted it. Rabbits are spray painted in nature. That's why they're vibrant fluorescent colors: orange, blue, red, white. White is not a natural color for rabbits. It is, however, a natural color for spray paint, which, as you know, is a fruit derived from the spray paint tree. They grow actually upside down like this. That is the hub of where it has connected to the tree. Several of those statements were lies, but you don't know which ones, unless you're smarter than me. Okay, it's not leaky, which is a good start. I can't smell anything. I don't like looking down the barrel of things. Whew. Well, that smells like spray paint, but what did I expect? Cap it, to keep it from being stolen. Well, the ears now look more rabbit color in nature. You may be asking, well, why not just repaint the rabbits entirely? I had considered dipping them in aircraft remover to remove whatever paint is on them and replacing it, but I don't like messing with the finish on antiques if possible, and these are older than me. So I don't want to mess with them if possible, and with garden ornaments, the weathered concrete look is kind of the thing right now. So if they need that later, then I will adjust them. I'll just strip the paint and put new paint on them. But right now I'm going to leave them as is. Give them that sort of rustic, I have a stone rabbit in my garden, look at me, aren't I wealthy look. That needs to dry and absorb the spray paint before it is affixed to the rabbit. I will use glue to do that. I will not sniff the glue. Whether or not that's true is up to you. Now, attaching the ears to a rabbit is all well and good, an act of fine necromancy. But what happens when you in fact want an entirely new rabbit? Well, that's a hard question to answer, and I'll tell you why. First of all, look at these rabbits. There's a bunny, but it's not a bunny. This is not a bunny. Like that weird French painting of the pipe that's not a pipe, that I don't understand because I'm a ignorant schmuck. The rabbit is made of concrete. How is the rabbit made of concrete? Well, the answer with concrete is you can't really carve concrete reliably. It shatters. It's like trying to carve glass. It doesn't work. So when you're looking at how the rabbit was cast, what you want to look for in a casting is, where's the flat spot? The answer is the butt. Most likely the rabbits are all cast vertically like this. Notice that also puts the ears nice and vertical. So they're probably made somehow into a big casting where there's just thousands of them in a big plate, and then they just fill it and smooth it and then just break the mold and get all the rabbits out. The problem being, I have no idea how that works because the rabbit doesn't have a good axis of symmetry. So if you were to put a positive mold into the mold powder, how does it actually get the rabbit in there? I mean, how do you get that out? This isn't like a hot casting mold like you would use for metal where you can put a complicated wax shape in there and then just melt it out with the metal. This would probably be, I don't know, a concrete, well, actually, it probably is hot waxing where they just, do that with a wax rabbit and then they melt it and pour it out and then they pour the real one or something similar. I'm not 100% sure on how they go about doing that. Where is the best axis of symmetry on the rabbit? The answer is the rabbit is symmetry in this direction. Sagittal, I think? So it's actually not symmetrical in that, but it's close enough. That would be the axis where this rabbit doesn't really have a seam, but you could cast the rabbit in two halves, laying down, create two halves out of material, and then bind them together. This rabbit doesn't have a seam, so it wasn't made that way. Not 100% sure how it was made. But I think I can do that. And that answers the question if you were wondering what this steaming, horribly smelly solution is here right now. This is a mixture of gelatin and sand and water, obviously, that just came out of my oven. It reeks horribly. I did go through a long and complicated process of making this. Editor, if you would, please make like, you haven't done this before, but make like a montage of that video, cut it up so that it looks impressive and you can see that. What do you mean I don't have an editor? What do you mean I have to do that myself? It's just water. I'm trying to boil water. It smells slightly like lizards, although leopard geckos really don't have a smell, which is nice. Mmm. Gritty. I've also hot glued a cup to the bottom of a rabbit. Okay, a flurry of creativity. I've had, I think, an idea of how to fix this problem that I did not foresee. Ooh, I'm stepping in it. Ooh, I agitated the gelatin. I would say it's been a success. It's been a failure, but failures are so much more fun. Mid-Atlantic accent is not a real accent, it's made up. So I got this solution here, and I had to rack my brain to try to figure out what is the best way to mold a rabbit. And I eventually came up with the idea that, well, whew, that's a smell. Because this isn't normal sand. No, I'm too cheap to use normal sand. I have a leopard gecko. Had him since 7th grade. It's a very old leopard. I originally had 2, but one died, 10 years ago. This is the waste sand, because I have to replace parts of it periodically. So mixing that with Jell-O and letting it sit out for a week, that's why there's the maggots. But anyway, what I'm going to do is take this rabbit, and I am going to squish him into this. And then I'm going to add a little bit of water to fill in the gaps, and harden it. Let it cool down so that the sand binds. Now, how do you do that? The hard part of this rabbit is the ears, because that is an area where if you were to mold, that would be stuck. I can't just pull him out, because there is an ear stuck there. But he also has a butt. Woo! So if you put that butt right against a hard surface, that area doesn't get goop on it. And then I can just cut whatever remains off and then just jimmy the rabbit out, hopefully, and get a proper half rabbit mold. So I'm going to attempt, now this should be 400 degrees, so it should be pretty warm. Okay, as gross as this is, it's weirdly satisfying to squish the rabbit into the sand. Oh, it's horribly smelling. It smells like a manure factory exploded. Which begs the question, what is a manure factory? Manure doesn't come from a factory. It comes from, well, scientifically, an anus of some creature. Unless it's starfish manure, because starfish do not have anuses. They secrete their feces out of their mouth, like a scad, which is a fictitious creature. Not like a sea cucumber, which is very closely related to starfish. It actually has a tubular digestive tract, which suggests to me that the tubular digestive tract evolved independently in multiple creatures, although I can't 100% guarantee that. I found a stick! So the idea is to get this stuff to surround the rabbit at its halfway point, and then compress it in so that the rabbit is fully engulfed in material. The trouble being that it really does have to be the exact midsection, or the rabbit will be improperly molded and really skinny. Or, I guess, if I were to add too much material, he would just be a really obese, chungus of a rabbit. Also, funny, probably not 100% ideal for, trying to make an exact copy of something that's very hard to copy. Because if rabbits were cheap to copy, nobody would buy rabbits at the rabbit store. Where the rabbits are actually bought, I have no idea. Probably Ames. If you don't know what Ames is, you're a lot younger than me and making me feel old. When I was a kid, that's where you went to get stuff, was the Ames. Okay, the rabbit is now pretty thoroughly installed within the sand. Let me use the pointy end to clear away excess. And let me show you what he looks like. As demonstrated here, the rabbit is halfway buried and beginning to fossilize. This smells really bad because it contains gelatin. Unflavored gelatin from the gelatin packs, little squares. That means that right now it's warm-ish, it's hot. Hot Jell-O. Tasty, except it's made of dirty lizard-flavored sand, so it would be very gritty and flavored like lizard. So that rabbit's just going to sit there until the jello hardens, binding the sand together into a mold. At which point, I will then be able to freeze the resulting material to harden it even further into basically a semi-elastic, viscoelastic, animal hoof-derived brick. Then I will be able to take the rabbit out, create the mold, and do it again, theoretically. I don't know, when you're working with rabbit, sand, and gelatin in order to produce stuff that really you should be buying at a store to do professional grade work, you can't there's the flies that came from the maggots. As you can possibly see, the rabbit has now been freed from his icy gelatin prison. That gelatin prison is now here. You'll note that this is very hard. It's actually getting frost just by condensing the sheer amount of massive humidity in this place. Rabbit-shaped hole made of ice jello sand mixture, which absolutely reeks despite being frozen. Now, there was a slight issue in that when I pulled the rabbit out, there would be a nub here that condenses the ear. That did break. So, I've gotten a small piece of clay, which I will affix to that hole. The primary purpose of just producing a void in the concrete that is roughly in the shape of a rabbit's ear. It doesn't need to be 100% perfect because just based on this shape alone, I do not think the rabbit will be 100% perfect in shape. So, the clay is attached. Now there is a little bit of a question as to where I got this big jar and what it's full of. The answer is it's water. Wet and fluoridated. The jar came from pickles. The bigger question is, can concrete set under frozen conditions? And that is actually pretty well understood. Concrete doesn't like ice. You can't freeze concrete as it's hardening. It won't work. So I don't know if the concrete will mesh 100% with this, but that's part of the fun. I don't know how this is going to turn out. Sand. The first consideration that I need to do is that there are slight voids in the mold. I am going to fill them with non-gelatin sand to try to reduce the existence of rabbit voids. What do I do with this sand? Where did it even come from? Oh well. The sands of time do not in fact taste like time. The voids result from air bubbles trapped, so if you compress the air bubbles into concrete, since this is a negative mold, they will be warts. Call me Sandy. Now, part of what I'm aiming for here, in terms of concrete consistency, so I'm not a concretist, the real manly dudes who, pour concrete for a living and, wear hard hats and vests, and they wear, complete clothing even though it's 90 degrees out and they never really get hot, and, they have bad backs, but lots of respect, unlike me who is a schmuck in his basement. They understand the true nature of concrete consistency, whereas I'm just sort of guessing. And I am guessing that in this case I want it to be slightly liquidy, so that it kind of gets a flat surface. That was the part that I was wondering while I was in the shower. Okay, so we want this relatively squishy. Now, I'm going to pour that into the rabbit. Doesn't look very rabbity. I mean, what do you expect? This does not smell like a rabbit either. The smell of this is distinctly unpleasant. I mean, it's reminiscent of raw sewage, but not as pungent and severe. There's not really that sulfurous tone. It's just sort of ugh. Not the concrete. The concrete smells like concrete. It actually smells very nice. The mold, though, gelatin, when it's exposed to dirt and left sort of out for a long time, definitely not something that smells good. I mean, it's basically meat goo, so, I mean, if you left meat out, the same thing would happen. I'm going to have to lift this flap where the ear is to make sure that the concrete really gets into the ear. This is probably, in theory, very similar to how chocolate rabbits are made, except with chocolate instead of concrete, and the mold probably does not smell like an exploded cow, which does happen. Just breathe concrete gas, that's fine. That's a long stick. I'm going to move that over here so I don't knock it down, because I already repaired one, or am in the process of repairing one, or, oh, the timeline. The timeline with these videos is, oh, that's why we wear the goggles. The timeline is always a little bit strange, and always messes me up a little bit, but, yes, chocolate rabbits would be made in a similar way, except the mold would probably be, you know, an actual mold, and you would not be using concrete, theoretically. I mean, that would be probably a funny prank if you were very cruel, is to make a chocolate rabbit filled with concrete, so that when somebody bites down, they ruin their teeth. Don't do that. That would be horrible. Dental pain is one of those things nobody likes. I gotta get it in the good old cottontail. In this case, concrete tail. Here comes Peter Concrete Tail, charging down the bunny trail. What he's doing, I don't know. But when he leaves, he's sure to go. Alright, now I put this flat back on to contain the ear. Oh, it is in the pan that I used to make brownies? Yes, it's also the pan that I mummified a banana in. You just wash it out and it's fine. If there is concrete stains in it, just add vinegar. Concrete dissolves excellent in vinegar. Well, okay, the rabbit is now leveled in the pan. So now I just need to wait until that rabbit hardens, then ideally get it out somehow? That's going to be the tricky part, and I don't even know if it's going to look remotely rabbit-like. But if it does come out, and it looks rabbit-like, then I will simply melt down the gelatin in the oven, which will be a horribly smelly experience, and cast the other side of the rabbit. If you remember the video where I had an issue with my canvas rabbit that I made two identical halves of the rabbit and could not mesh them, I will have to remember to mold the other side of the rabbit to have two halves of a rabbit, which can make a whole rabbit, because rabbits live in holes. Therefore, they are made of milk, because milk is whole milk, which indicates that it comes from donkeys, because donkeys are called burros because they live underground. What was I doing? And I am back where I was. Huh. But the rabbit is hard, I think. Everyone likes a good hard rabbit. The water is still here. That was a bit of a mistake. This is prodigiously smelly. It's been sitting here for a week. Probably a maggot issue, rust, decomposition. Smells like a barnyard, or actually more appropriately, what rabbits actually smell like. But the rabbit should be hard enough for me to remove him. I suppose, ooh, it's wet! Why? I was expecting it to be dry. I don't... Alright, let's, Oh. Oh! I have to touch it. Oh no. Oh, this is, oh no. No. No, no. Oh, it was anaerobic under the rabbit and decomposing rapidly, so that was a whiff of something I didn't want to smell, but I sure feel awake right now, as you can see. As you can see, the rabbit is rabbit-shaped, roughly. I mean, he's a little bit dirty right now, and covered in rotten gelatin, so I'm going to have to give him a rinse. And while doing that, I'm going to put this in the oven. Oh, that is going to reek so bad. And I'm going to make the other half of the rabbit. Well, I have literally, figuratively, metaphorically, and actually no idea where the timeline is in this video. This video is so many fragments of a video, it'll just take me like most of my life to stick it all together and stitch it into something cohesive, or relatively cohesive, which, judging by what you've seen so far, I was apparently unsuccessful at. Regardless, as you can note, the moisture issue has partially evaporated. The floor is now somewhat dry because I left the windows open for like a week, and luckily nobody snuck through them, which is a real issue. I think I don't know who goes through a window to sneak into a basement with a weirdo talking to himself in it. Other than that, it's time to assemble some rabbits. I have pre-charged my glue. There it goes. Glue. Sniffing glue. It smells like sort of piney, I guess. Don't sniff glue. It's if you sniff too hard, it'll go up your nose and then get in your brain. It doesn't actually get in your brain. Your nose actually, literally, in that sense, doesn't actually connect to your brain. Except it does. Your olfactory bulb, which is a big, long part of your brain, sort of, it's actually a cranial nerve, but it's a big, fat cranial nerve, does connect to your nose through little nerves. That's why if you snort warm, tepid water from a pond, the amoebas, Nigeria fowl, no way I'm pronouncing that, go up your nose, go through those nerves, and straight into your brain. So your nose does connect to your brain, but that would not get in your brain. It would get lodged in your sinus and need to be surgically removed. It's time to assemble a rabbit. Firstly, the ears have been painted. Now, they expanded slightly, so it's not a perfect fit, but these are concrete rabbits. They're not designed for you to look close at. They're designed to be in a little rabbit herd. Herd? A rabbit's a herd, a pile, or a heap. I will call it a heap of rabbits. Therefore, you require a heap of rabbits in order to, generate this. So nobody's actually going to notice that the ears are not perfect. I got my super glue. That glue you don't want to sniff. You'll get the drain bramage. I already did, so it won't affect me. I've also got this. Rabbit halves. I made the other half. Ooh, they're kind of smelly because they were in, it's been a week or so for me, but for you it's been basically instantaneous. That stuff over there is rotten, really bad. I can't even go to that side of the basement anymore where it's being kept. It's so smelly. Rotting gelatin mixed with sand. Makes a great mold when it's frozen. You can see this one actually left some of the fine detail, and this one did not as much, but it's adequate. I had to chisel off the edges to make them relatively smooth, but they are not perfect. And they are asymmetrical, as I kind of expected they might be. It does form something resembling a rabbit, but Frankensteinian in nature. You could also bookend that and have a trans-dimensional rabbit. I mean, it's like, I got a rabbit through my head. That's dumb. But fortunately, no one will ever see this. Oh wait, you already did. So, I shall glue the bunny. Firstly, the ears. I probably should wear glasses with super glue, but I don't want to, and I highly doubt I'm going to get super glue in my eye. Wouldn't it be funny if I do? Oh, duh. You gotta turn the cap on the super glue to puncture the seal. This is fresh glue. The freshest of glue. Super glue is something you should always have on hand for doing any sort of arts, crafts, science, whatever. Also injuries. I once made a homemade knife and nearly cut my thumb off, glued it back together, and look, not even a scar. That was years ago, though. It's like a weird granuloma on my hand for years because I glued myself to a rabbit. Metal left, material in my hand that was, permanently stuck there forever. But I eventually, it's kind of gross, but, self-surgery is kind of important. Medical bills are expensive. I'm not paying some guy money to do medicine on me when I quite literally am a doctor. Not a medical doctor, I'm a doctor of schmuckery. So, you can see the ears are not a perfect match. They don't match the head completely, and they're partially chipped. So I'm going to try to plug up the chip with this. I don't know where the glue's going exactly, but the idea is to get the ears glued so that the glue will actually make not a seal. So the super glue is actually what's holding the glue on. This is just to produce a kind of rim between the rabbit and the ears so that I can paint it later and it'll kind of look consistent. So that's not a perfect fix, but at least he has ears of some sort. Now, this Frankensteinian chungus, on the other hand, that's a little bit more challenging. So sort of the fundamental issue that you're going to have with a rabbit is that These are not totally flat. Super glue is very good for bonding things that can touch closely. But if you can see light through it, super glue is not a very good structural compound. Which is why I have the hot glue. Hot glue is not as sticky. It will not seal as well, but it will give you structure. Mostly because I need to fill in this crack in this rabbit somehow. Oof. Fill in rabbit crack is something that I'm about to learn how to do. So I'm going to take, I think this side. This side ended up rougher. Oh, it's also smellier than the other side. That's the newer side. These had to come out of the mold because the mold is very wet and moldy. So I had to dry them in the oven. You don't want to cook it too hot in the oven when you're, sticking your rabbit in the oven. Probably about, I'd say 300 degrees tops. That's fine. So one thing I'm going to add to the center of the rabbit is my logo. Just stick that in there. You could hide money in the rabbit if you wanted to, but I don't have any money left to hide. I spent it all on concrete. Not really. Concrete is not that expensive right now, but it will be. So now the rabbit has a seam. I got as I said, filling rabbit crack. Pain is not actually real. However, hot glue is hot. Interestingly, there got air in my glue. Probably should be wearing goggles. There is a surgery you can get. Oh boy. This is really full of air. I forget what it's called. Bilateral synglectomy? Basically, it's a sideways lobotomy, or that's how I think of it. Except instead of removing the frontal lobe, which is what a lobotomy does, it removes basically the middle part of your brain, which results in a weird inability to perceive the negative aspects of pain. Now, what does that mean? It's super weird, because almost everything in the human body has a physical and a mental component. So when you remove the human body's ability to perceive the negativity of pain, you can still perceive pain. It's not, because there is another disease where you just don't feel pain. You would like stick your finger in this hot glue, for example, and you would not feel it. But with this brain surgery, had to reload. With this specialized brain surgery, it doesn't remove your ability to feel pain, but your ability to feel it is bad. So you'd put your finger in the hot glue and be like, I'm burning. You wouldn't care. Theoretically, it's not 100% perfect. It's supposedly, sometimes used to treat chronic pain, which sounds really cool, except brain surgery has a lot of side effects. So I don't think, some brain surgeon walks in and says, hey, you want to never feel pain again? I'd be like, sure. That sounds like a great idea. But also, I'm a schmuck, so I don't make good decisions, by and large. Why am I talking about pain when I'm painting a rabbit? Probably because I burned my hand slightly. I don't think I actually did. I think it was one of those sensory reactions where you think you're being burned, and you're like, burning, but you didn't actually touch anything hot. So the idea of this glue is partially to bond the rabbit together, but also to give it a structural aspect that I can paint over. So the rabbit will be painted so that he looks like a single rabbit. Although you can tell, one, that is a very asymmetrical rabbit because I did not mark the molds very well. Also, that rabbit is substantially thicker than the actual rabbit. But I think that you better not put in that little stupid thing, that little stupid double parentheses thing that was on like the last 3 videos. Don't do that. But, did you just do it? Once it's painted, I think it'll look less ridiculous. While that is drying, and I prepare to paint the rabbit, I may have to file down this glue a little bit, but it needs to harden for that. I am going to give because this is technically a science channel. So you came here to see science. Unfortunately, I fix rabbits. I can't really do science because I'm not a great scientist. I'm bad at scientating. But I will explain to you and learn you why rabbits get broken. Briefly. So, why do rabbits get broken? 1, why did these ears originally come off? because the rabbit got hit with something. But that's actually scientifically interesting when you consider that concrete is very brittle. It's not as strong as you would think. These are fragments of what the rabbits are made of, which is unreinforced sifted concrete. It's like breaking a dirt clod. Now, if the concrete's a little thicker, yeah, but it's still super brittle. This concrete in particular, because it does not have aggregate apart from the sand and small stones that made it through the sifting, that severely weakens the concrete. That's probably something all you concrete guys have been pointing out to me. Why are you making the rabbit out of this? It makes it brittle. Concrete is not meant to be pure cement and sand. It is meant to be essentially a glue that holds together rocks in a matrix. So the rocks add a great deal of strength. If you don't put the rocks in the cement, it's this. The rocks hold it together. This is sifted, so it's easier to mold, but really not strong. And I can see from the cracks in this that it's not sifted. You can see there's little rocks in there, little tiny rocks, but it does not have large aggregate. So concrete that you see in a building has rebar. Do I have any rebar? No, I don't have it. They don't let me have rebar anymore. Rebar is metal rods that are in the concrete. The concrete hardens around them to keep the rod stiff, but the rod provides strength to the concrete, making it less brittle. So basically concrete is like glue. It's like plastic, brittle plastic, that has something in it to make it harder. So these rabbits are actually very brittle, especially projections like this. I mean, that's pretty hard. I could probably drop that rabbit on something and he probably won't break. But something came and knocked his ears clean off. That's not hard to do. You knock him over, you tip him, you drop him a couple inches, the ears will pop right off. They will pop off here too, they're just glued on. Additionally, and that's why this seam is going to pose a problem for this rabbit over the course of years if he's put outside. I live in New York. These rabbits did not come from New York because the yard I stole them out of is actually in a different state, so I can't get arrested for it in New York. Regardless of that, it's freezing. Not literally, it's September, so it's only very cold, not super cold. Freeze-thaw cycles. Water falls on the rabbits from the sky. Magic sky water. That magic sky water gets into any crack available to it. So that's why you don't go outside naked in the sky water times, because it will get inside you. When the water seeps into a crack in concrete or even in stone and then freezes, it expands, and when water expands, it breaks things. It pushes apart. So that's pretty much what can happen to this rabbit. What will happen to this guy if there's any break in there? Water will get in. When it freezes, it will expand. It'll blow those two halves apart. Sealing the rabbit with glue, like if I went through and did a better glue job and sealed him up real nice, might give him a little bit longer of a period of survival. Painting over it to get a good seal with like multiple layers, also good, but that seam will eventually break. If I left this rabbit on my front porch for the next 50 years, this rabbit will eventually just explode in half. Not violently, it'll just pop and break open. But, I mean, do you really need a stone rabbit to survive that long? I think this archaeologically will be interesting in that, I mean, this is not the only thing that we produce. We produce a lot. When people come back in the future and dig up, because this is even like 100 years ago, even like colonial period around here is actually really substantial archaeology, going through a colonial era trash pit and just picking out pottery. It's like, ooh, and that's like 300 years ago. There's people in Britain living in a house that is as old as you are digging through the outhouse of. But there will be middens and stuff that have like these things just chucked in it. These get lost in people's yards all the time. In 300 years, some guy might go sifting, ooh, this is a 2020 era house, and you know, look, we found a stone rabbit statue. And as messed up as that is, like ears broken off, paint chewed up, that'll be on someone's shelf because it's like, this is, you know, they worshipped this 300 years ago. I don't think that's actually the case, but that's one of the things where the value of antiques sort of goes up over time until it eventually, super cheap stuff becomes ridiculously expensive. Like a dumb statue that some apprentice plumber made. They did have plumbers, that's where the word comes from. In ancient Rome, it's like, oh, I made a facinus. You can look up a facinus. It's super weird. I kind of want to make one. But, I made a fastness, buried, and then suddenly we dig it up and it's like worth $1 million worth of fine art. I'm getting off on a tangent, but the point is, I want to finish these, and I need to magically paint them, so you go ahead to the future where I've done that. I'll stay here and actually do something about this issue of Frankenchungus, and then we'll be back. Well, it's been a long and smelly journey to get this far, but as you can see, I have 3 pots, because pots are legal in New York now. First off, let me open this one. It's a rabbit. What a surprise. Of course it's a surprise. I put it there. Why wouldn't I know that it's a rabbit? I know exactly what order they're in. This is the rabbit that is actually, intact. You don't want to find a non-intact rabbit when you're, going through your, luggage. It's like, oh. So the reason I bring out this rabbit first is to say this is what the rabbit should look like. This rabbit is relatively intact. I mean, the paint is peeling because the thing's like 30 years old. But that is the concrete rabbit default, the standard for what a rabbit should look like. Do you want him in profile or head on? Oh wait, you can't actually talk to me because this is probably 10 years past after I made this for you. These rabbits have probably already come to life and eaten me in my sleep. But anyway, this rabbit was the source to make all other parts of all other rabbits that were missing. And it's still fully intact. Intact, but super smelly. Rabbits live outside, so he should be fine. Now what's under pot number 2? Nothing. But that's also pot number 1. This is pot number 2. New ears rabbit. I have affixed the white painted ears to the rabbit and determined that they do not fit that great. It's most noticeable from behind in that they're too wide. So what occurred there is that when the rabbit was inserted in the clay, he was inserted slightly too hard. The clay ballooned out slightly. So the mold is not perfectly sized to the head. It still fits. They're still pretty well attached. They're white. I glued them, sealed the cyanacrylate glue, sealed it, painted it. I think if you saw him in the garden, and especially after weathering for a few years, you probably wouldn't really notice too much. I mean, at a distance, that rabbit has fake ears. Well, they're not fake. They're literally concrete. So, replacement ears. I mean, compared to the other, from behind, he doesn't look... I mean, from behind, it's pretty obvious. That's where the issue is biggest, because these ears narrow and these ears don't. From the front, actually, come to think of it, it's pretty obvious too. But, I mean, given a choice between no ear rabbit, you remember what that guy looked like, all sad and earless, and fake ears rabbit, it's not a perfect repair, but it's okay. Which brings me to this. My attempt to create an entirely new rabbit, using the process used to make these deformed ears, but for the whole thing, creating a literal clone of this guy using a mold of him. And, well, I call him Frankenchungus. Because compared to the other rabbits, there's the original, he is significantly wider. He is roughly rabbit-shaped, I mean, vaguely, although significantly bigger and slightly lopsided in shape. He's made of concrete. Like, that is not like some sort of dumb plastic thing. He is glued together. So that is 2 halves, a clone of this rabbit in mold, glued. Which, there is kind of a problem in that, 1, looking at him right now, and previously, these rabbits are not side-to-side symmetrical. They have a bend in the neck, so that's not perfect. 2, I did not fully delineate the halfway mark on the rabbit, so one of the sides came out fouler than it should, resulting in this. But I think this thing is actually quite amusing. And it looks like a rabbit. I mean, if you saw these three stooges sitting around in my garden, you'd say, oh, that's definitely 3 identical rabbits that totally have no secondary work applied to them. They all look like they came off of the manufacturer's press. However in the world they actually managed to mold these things. Totally identical. You cannot see a single difference between these 3 rabbits. And that is what I've done. Now you may be asking yourself, you filthy, filthy schmuck. Isn't this a science channel? Why aren't you doing science? You're repairing rabbits. Well, it's science in the sense that it's science. Because I got to figure out how to make a mold. The mold was relatively effective. I mean, I made this identical rabbit to the others, and that guy's got his ears back. So, probably not the most scientific thing, but kind of a do-it-yourself thing for understanding how a mold is made and why these concrete rabbits fail occasionally. And now I'm dirty and covered in dirt of several species, slightly sticky, and very smelly. So I'm going to go do, okay, that's just a regular fly. I think the maggot problem is getting out of hand, so I might need to go solve that, but I won't solve that because it's gross, and if I wait long enough, it'll solve itself, I'm sure. So, I do like comments if you have an idea for any sort of science or science projects for me to do. Take the air quote one loosely, but not that loosely. And there we go. End of the episode. Extra.